The early morning fog hangs heavy over the Ardennes Forest, December 1944. Lieutenant Colonel James Harrington stands at the edge of a massive clearing, watching as dozens of men struggle to assemble what appears to be a monstrous contraption of steel and rubber. His weathered face betrays nothing, but his eyes. Those eyes have seen too much. They said it would change everything. He whispers to no one in particular, his breath visible in the biting cold. Behind him, Major William Preston approaches, boots crunching on frozen ground. "Sir, General Patterson is on the radio. He's demanding an update." Harrington doesn't turn. "Tell him it's still not operational. Tell him we're trying." The distant thunder of artillery punctuates his words. Men flinch, but continue working. They've grown accustomed to the symphony of death that plays endlessly around them. "And the funding?" Preston asks, his voice lower now. "Gone," Harrington replies, finally turning to face his second-in-command. "Every last cent. $3 million of American taxpayer money, sunk into this." He gestures toward the half-assembled machine. As if on cue, a crucial component snaps, sending men scrambling and unleashing a torrent of curses. A young soldier is caught underneath, his scream piercing the morning air before abruptly silencing. "That's the fourth man this week," Preston says grimly. Harrington closes his eyes. And for what? A general's dream that should have stayed a dream. In the distance, through gaps in the tree line, the unmistakable silhouettes of German panzer tanks emerge from the mist. Time has run out. 6 months earlier, Washington, D.C. sweltered under the oppressive June heat. In a wood-paneled room at the Pentagon, Colonel Harrington stood at attention before a table of stern-faced generals, his presentation boards displaying schematics for what would be called Project Colossus. "Gentlemen, conventional tanks have proven insufficient against German fortifications. What I propose is something entirely new, a land battleship capable of clearing multiple minefields while providing unprecedented firepower support." General Patterson, a bulldog of a man with political connections reaching the White House, leaned forward. "You're talking about a tank the size of a building, Harrington?" "Yes, sir. 5 times larger than anything on the battlefield. Virtually impervious to anti-tank weapons." What Harrington didn't mention was his personal stake in this. 3 years earlier, his younger brother had died when his Sherman tank was hit by a German 88mm shell in North Africa. A loss that haunted his dreams and drove his obsession with protection. The memory flashed before him, Robert's charred dog tags placed in his palm by a solemn chaplain. "He never had a chance, sir." Major Preston watched from the back of the room, noting how the general's eyes lit up at the dramatic scale models. Only he knew that the engineering calculations were based on theoretical principles that had never been tested. "Your background is in accounting, not engineering," Preston had warned Harrington the night before. "We're making promises we can't keep. This war needs game changers, not incremental improvements," Harrington had replied, the familiar stubbornness hardening his features. Back in the Pentagon briefing room, General Patterson slammed his fist on the table. "By God, this is exactly what we need. Something to make Hitler soil his pants." Within weeks, Project Colossus received emergency funding, bypassing normal procurement channels. Engineers and materials were diverted from other critical war efforts. A remote manufacturing facility was established in Pennsylvania Steel Country, where 3 shifts worked around the clock. Harrington found himself promoted, celebrated as a visionary. In rare moments of honesty with himself, usually late at night after too much whiskey, he wondered if he was driven more by vengeance than innovation. A question he quickly drowned with another drink. Preston remained the voice of caution, documenting each engineering compromise, each failed test, each budget overage. "The weight calculations are off by at least 30%, he noted in one report that Harrington promptly buried. By September, the first prototype was half-built when the catastrophic flaw became impossible to ignore. The engine design couldn't generate enough power to move the massive structure, and redesigning it would require millions more. "We've come too far to turn back," Harrington argued to Preston as they stood amid the towering, incomplete hulk. "If we admit failure now, other projects lose funding too." Men like my brother will keep dying in tin cans. Preston studied his commander, seeing not the confident visionary but a broken man chasing redemption. Sometimes the bravest thing is admitting when we're wrong, sir. General Patterson, however, was unmoved by engineering realities. With Allied forces pushing toward Germany and congressional committees asking questions about military spending, he needed a success story. Colossus would be deployed, ready or not. Hey folks, I see we have viewers from all over the country today. Drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Whether you're from the sunny California coast or the snowy Northeast, we love to hear from our history buffs around the nation. As December approached, the now bankrupt project was rushed to the front lines in Belgium, just as intelligence reports warned of a massive German offensive brewing in the Ardennes Forest, what would soon be known as the Battle of the Bulge. The Ardennes Forest, early December 1944. Snow falls gently on the canvas tents of the command post where Harrington hunches over maps, dark circles under his eyes. Project Colossus has consumed everything: budget, careers, and increasingly, his sanity. Transportation alone cost us double the estimates, Preston reports, sliding a folder across the table. The roads weren't designed for something this heavy. We destroyed 3 bridges getting here. Harrington doesn't look up. Necessary sacrifices. With respect, sir, the men are calling it Harrington's folly, behind your back. This makes Harrington look up, eyes flashing. Let them talk. When Colossus rolls through the Siegfried line while they're still pinned down by pillboxes, they'll change their tune. The tension between them has grown unbearable. Once friends who shared whiskey and war stories, they now communicate through clipped sentences and formal reports. Preston represents the reality Harrington refuses to face. Lieutenant Miller enters, saluting sharply. Young and eager, Miller represents the new crop of officers, rushed through training, untested, dangerously optimistic. Sir, the technical team reports the secondary transmission is failing. They need another week. We don't have a week, Harrington snaps. Tell them 3 days. After Miller leaves, Preston speaks softly. James, I've respected you since officer training. But this has become something personal. Something dangerous. Harrington stares at his second-in-command. Are you questioning my judgment, Major? I'm questioning whether your brother's ghost is making decisions now. The words hang in the air like artillery smoke. For a moment, Preston sees rage flash across Harrington's face, followed by something worse, recognition. Instead of responding, Harrington dismisses him with a wave. Get some rest, Major. Tomorrow's a big day. That night, Preston does something unprecedented. He circumvents the chain of command, sending an encrypted message directly to General Eisenhower's headquarters detailing the project's fatal flaws. It's career suicide, but he sees no alternative. Dawn breaks with chaos. German reconnaissance planes have been spotted. The massive Colossus, still unfinished, sits like a beacon in the clearing, impossible to camouflage effectively. They've seen it, Miller reports, panic edging his voice. Intelligence says panzer divisions are being redirected here. Harrington's face remains impassive. Then we accelerate. Full assembly by nightfall. That's impossible, the chief engineer protests. The hydraulic systems aren't calibrated. Make it possible, Harrington orders, his voice deadly calm. Or I'll find someone who will. By midday, the situation deteriorates further. Intelligence reports confirm their worst fears. The Germans have identified Colossus as a priority target. What was meant to be America's secret weapon has become a liability, drawing enemy attention to a thinly defended sector. At 1,400 hours, the unthinkable happens. A junior officer arrives with military police. Lieutenant Colonel Harrington, I have orders to relieve you of command, effective immediately. The tent falls silent. Harrington stares at the paper, then at Preston, understanding dawning on his face. You did this. Preston meets his gaze steadily. I did my duty. Duty? Harrington laughs bitterly. My brother died because our tanks were inferior. I was trying to save lives. And how many will die protecting this monstrosity that can't even move under its own power? Preston counters. Before Harrington can respond, distant explosions rock the camp. German artillery has begun ranging the area. The first shells fall wide, but they're finding their mark. As Harrington is escorted away, Preston takes emergency command, ordering immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel. The half-finished Colossus will have to be destroyed to prevent its capture. Hey everyone! If you're enjoying this historical deep dive, please hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. We're so close to reaching 1,000 subscribers on the channel, and your support means everything to us. Every like helps more history enthusiasts find our content. As night falls, Preston stands alone before the massive steel beast, demolition charges set. The irony isn't lost on him. Millions spent building what he must now destroy. In the light of flares and distant explosions, the Colossus looks less like a weapon of war and more like a monument to hubris. The German artillery intensifies, and somewhere in the darkness, tank engines growl like approaching predators. The night explodes into chaos. German artillery finds its range, shells screaming through the darkness to erupt in geysers of frozen earth and splintered trees. The evacuation becomes a desperate scramble as vehicles bog down in mud and panicked men flee on foot. Preston stands at the forest edge, watching flames illuminate the massive silhouette of Colossus. The demolition charges are set, the timer counting down. 15 minutes to clear the area. Sir! A voice calls from the darkness. Miller emerges, dragging a wounded engineer. The Germans have broken through the western perimeter. They'll be here in minutes. The charges are set. Get everyone back to the secondary position, Preston orders. Miller hesitates. Sir, Colonel Harrington has escaped custody. He's inside Colossus. Preston feels the blood drain from his face. What? He overpowered his guards. Said he wouldn't let them destroy his creation. Without hesitation, Preston sprints toward the monstrous machine, ignoring the artillery fire, walking closer with each salvo. The ground shakes beneath his feet, partly from explosions, partly from the approaching German tanks. Inside Colossus, the interior is a labyrinth of unfinished corridors and exposed wiring. Harrington! Preston shouts, his voice echoing through the metal chambers. He finds the colonel in the main control room, frantically working at the controls. Harrington doesn't look up. I can make it work. Just need to bypass the secondary hydraulics. James, there are demolition charges set to blow in 10 minutes. We need to go. Then disarm them, Harrington snaps, sweat streaming down his face despite the cold. I've got the main engine started. Listen. Indeed, somewhere deep in the belly of the beast, machinery groans to life, immediately followed by a series of mechanical failures and alarms. It's over, Preston says softly. The Germans are almost here. We need to destroy Colossus before they capture it. Harrington finally looks up, his eyes wild. My brother died because we sent him out in an inferior tank. I promised his wife, promised his son, that I would make sure it never happened again. And how many brothers will die tonight protecting this failed experiment? Preston counters. How many more widows and fatherless children? Outside, the distinctive sound of German panzer engines grows louder. Searchlights sweep the clearing. The moment stretches between them, two soldiers, once friends, divided by grief and duty. Then Harrington's shoulders slump. Get out, he says quietly. I'll disarm the charges. Use Colossus to buy time for the evacuation. Preston shakes his head. That's suicide. It's the only way this project serves any purpose. Harrington's smile is bitter. Maybe I can take a few panzers with me. I won't leave you here. That's an order, Major. Their eyes lock in silent communication, years of friendship, respect, and recent division compressed into a single look. An artillery shell strikes nearby, rocking the entire structure. Warning lights flash as systems fail. Go! Harrington shouts. That's an order. Preston hesitates, then salutes sharply. It's been an honor, sir. As he races from Colossus, Preston rallies the remaining men. Fall back to the secondary position. Move. From the forest edge, Preston watches as German tanks enter the clearing, their commanders cautious, suspicious of the massive American machine. Incredibly, Colossus's main gun turns slowly, the hydraulics screaming in protest. A single shot booms across the clearing, missing the lead panzer but sending the Germans into defensive positions. For 5 precious minutes, Harrington keeps the Germans at bay. 5 minutes that allow dozens of American soldiers to escape through the forest paths. Then, without warning, Colossus shudders as internal explosions cascade through its systems. Whether from German fire or catastrophic mechanical failure, the behemoth begins to collapse, secondary ammunition cooking off in a spectacular, deadly display. Preston watches, tears freezing on his cheeks, as 3 years of work and one man's desperate quest for redemption disappear in flames. By dawn, all that remains of Project Colossus is a blackened skeleton of twisted metal. The Germans, wary of a trap, advance cautiously, giving the remaining Americans time to fall back to friendly lines. In the bitter cold of a medical tent, Preston writes his after-action report. The official version will cite strategic withdrawal and denial of experimental equipment to enemy forces. It will not mention the cost, not just in dollars, but in lives and broken dreams. Spring 1945. Victory in Europe is weeks away. In a Washington, D.C. hearing room, Major William Preston, now Lieutenant Colonel Preston, testifies before a congressional committee investigating military procurement failures. Project Colossus represents the single largest financial miscalculation in the history of American wartime development, Senator Hayworth states, peering over his glasses. $3 million, enough to have built 60 conventional Sherman tanks. Preston sits straight-backed in his dress uniform, medals gleaming under the harsh lights. Yes, sir. And you believe Colonel Harrington knew the project was doomed? Preston chooses his words carefully. Colonel Harrington was convinced of the project's strategic value. His technical assessment was optimistic. Optimistic? Senator Rayburn scoffs. The thing couldn't even move under its own power. With respect, Senator, many wartime innovations appear impossible until they succeed. The atomic project at Los Alamos seemed equally far-fetched to many. The comparison silences the room momentarily. Preston continues, Colossus failed as a weapon system, but the technical data gathered has proven valuable for post-war heavy machinery development. After the hearing, Preston walks alone through the Capitol grounds, cherry blossoms swirling around him. A voice calls his name. He turns to find Rebecca Harrington, James's widow, holding the hand of a solemn-faced boy of about 7. Mrs. Harrington, he says, removing his hat. I wasn't sure you'd want to see me. William, she says simply. This is James's nephew, Robert. Named after his uncle. Preston kneels to the boy's height. Your uncle was a brave man. Did he kill lots of Germans? The boy asks, eyes wide. Preston hesitates. He saved many American lives. Later, over coffee at a quiet cafe, Rebecca speaks frankly. They're calling him a failure, a wastrel. Destroying his reputation. I know, Preston says heavily. I've tried to counter the narrative, but you warned him all along, she finishes. James told me in his letters. He knew you were right. Preston stares into his coffee. I never wanted to be right. I wanted him to succeed. He was never the same after Robert died, she says softly. He carried that guilt like it was welded to his soul. We all carry something from this war. They sit in companionable silence, 2 people connected by a man neither could save. 3 months later, Preston stands in a vast warehouse in Aberdeen, Maryland, where the remnants of Colossus, salvaged from the Ardennes, are being studied by engineering teams. A young lieutenant guides him through the analysis. The basic concept was sound, the lieutenant explains, pointing to modified schematics. The power-to-weight ratio was the primary flaw. With modern materials and redesigned drive systems, something like this might actually work. Preston runs his hand along a twisted hull plate. At what cost? Sir? Nothing, Lieutenant. Carry on. By 1950, with the Cold War intensifying, Preston finds himself recalled to active duty. The Pentagon briefing room is eerily similar to the one where Harrington first pitched Colossus. Some of the same generals sit around the table, now discussing the Soviet threat. Colonel Preston. General Wallace begins, "Your experience with the Colossus project makes you uniquely qualified for this assignment. The Soviets are developing their own super-heavy tanks. We need a response." Preston looks at the familiar cycle beginning again. Fear driving innovation, ambition masquerading as necessity. "Before we proceed, General, I'd like to establish some engineering parameters and budget constraints." The room grows quiet. One of the younger officers smirks at Preston's caution. Preston continues, undeterred. "Colossus failed because we prioritized the dream over reality. I won't make that mistake again." By 1952, Preston's methodical approach results in practical improvements to existing tank designs rather than revolutionary failures. His team's modifications to the Patton tank series save millions while improving battlefield effectiveness. In a quiet ceremony, he's awarded the Legion of Merit. The citation makes no mention of Colossus or Harrington, but Preston ensures the medal makes its way to Rebecca Harrington with a note. "James's vision made this possible." On a crisp autumn day in 1955, Preston visits Arlington National Cemetery. Though Harrington's body was never recovered from the Ardennes, a memorial stone stands among the endless white markers. Preston places a small model tank beside the stone, not the fantastical Colossus, but the reliable Patton tank his team improved. "We got it right this time, James," he says to the silent stone. "Not as glamorous as your dream, but it works. It keeps our boys alive." As he turns to leave, he notices a familiar figure, Robert, now a teenager, standing tall in a military academy uniform. "Sir," the boy salutes crisply. "My aunt said I might find you here." Preston returns the salute. "You've grown." "I'm applying to West Point next year," Robert says, eyes bright with the same determination Preston once saw in his uncle's face. "Your uncle would be proud." They still talk about him, you know. At the academy, some of the instructors use Colossus as a case study in innovation failure. Preston winces. "And what do you think?" The boy considers the question seriously. "I think sometimes you have to dream big to get anywhere at all, even if you fail." In that moment, Preston sees the legacy of both Harrington brothers living on. Robert's sacrifice and James's vision melded into something new, something hopeful. "When you get to West Point," Preston says, "look me up. I have some stories about your uncle they don't teach in the case studies." As twilight descends over Arlington National Cemetery, Preston and young Robert walk together among the markers of fallen heroes. The boy listens intently as Preston shares stories of James Harrington, not the failed innovator of official records, but the complex man who dared to dream beyond conventional boundaries. "Your uncle understood something essential about war," Preston explains. "That sometimes the greatest acts of courage happen far from the battlefield, in the quiet moments when we choose duty over ambition, truth over comfort." The legacy of Project Colossus evolved over the decades that followed. What began as a catastrophic failure gradually transformed into valuable lessons that informed American military development throughout the Cold War. The engineering data, carefully preserved despite political pressure to bury all evidence of the project, eventually contributed to breakthroughs in heavy machinery design for civilian applications. And in military academies across America, the Colossus case study became not merely a cautionary tale of hubris, but a nuanced examination of innovation's necessary risks. James Harrington's name, once synonymous with wasteful spending, gained a measure of redemption as new generations of military planners recognized the courage required to pursue revolutionary rather than incremental change. In the decades that followed, Robert Harrington would rise through military ranks, carrying with him both his father's sacrifice and his uncle's vision, tempered by the wisdom Preston had imparted. The three men, bound by war's complex legacy, represented different facets of America's military evolution: the necessary sacrifice, the bold innovation, and the pragmatic implementation. As Preston often reflected in his later years, in war's darkest moments, we discover our truest selves. Harrington found redemption not in Colossus's success, but in his final act of self-sacrifice, choosing to save lives rather than vindicate his vision. Some failures, it seems, contain more nobility than many successes. Hey history fans! If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of World War II's forgotten chapters, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We're constantly exploring these hidden stories of innovation, sacrifice, and human drama behind the headlines of history. Drop a comment below with other military projects you'd like us to explore in future videos. Until next time, remember that history isn't just about what happened, it's about what almost happened, and the brave men and women who stood at those crossroads.